Well, hi everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host Bill Whittle, and hopefully we've got good sound, good picture. Clock is running, and we're underway. Um, it's good to see everybody. Uh, there's some questions going on in the comment section about what might have happened to my co-host. I'll get to that in just a second. Um, we usually, for those of you who watch this on either YouTube during the stream or on YouTube recorded, which is virtually everybody, of the literally dozens of people who tune in and watch this show, the it's been our habit and our tradition, and actually a source of a great deal of fun. And when I actually have more time on my hands and when I don't know what to do with, I will certainly refresh this long playing record that I have. But we do a pre-roll. Uh, Usually we do a pre-roll of my favorite TV intros. On the Stratosphere Lounge, we do just the soundtracks, and on Stratosphere Studio, we did the actual clips from YouTube. Um, Thank you very much for that, Matthew. That was very kind. Bill, I have to say before things really get going, what you saw, Apollo 11, was the best documentary I have ever seen. That was very kind of you. Thank you. I'm very, very, very proud of that. Anyway, so just real quick. Um, so, like I said, we usually roll the thing. It's about 15 minutes long. Uh, Not always, but most of the time on Thursdays and occasionally on the Monday night show. I'll end up being wrapped up here around 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon, and I'll just duck home. I live 10 minutes from here. Get a quick nap for the day, because usually I'm here till about 9 o'clock our time, and then another hour to get this thing uploaded, and usually I have stuff to do after that. So in any event, um, I generally go home, get a nap. Now, I can start this machine from home. I've got remote desktop. And depending on where we are, I will either turn on, usually what I'll do is I'll turn on the 15-minute pre-roll, start it streaming, get in the car, and I'm usually in the studio by the time that this thing comes to the end, although it's usually within a minute or two. Sometimes if I'm not sure how long it's going to take to get in, I just start with the stream button, and then it's just the signal out. That's better than nothing, so people know that, at least I'm coming. So uh, in the event that you're one of those people that comes and watches live and you see the stream and no music, means I'm in traffic or whatever on the way. So anyway, that's that. So people are wondering what happened to the Gorn. Well, he started lipping off, and so I decapitated that son of a bitch and put him in that crate you see back there. Um, yeah, there you go. No, actually, what happened was we're going to find out just how interesting this is. So Scott is in South America. He was hoping he could do the show um, from down there using the internet that he could find, but I think he may actually be in the deepest, darkest jungles. And so we found out it was either the day of the show or the day before the show, which is normally on Tuesday, that he wasn't able to do it. And Zoe's been our Johnny on the spot backup, but he wasn't able to do it either, or yesterday. So we shot the right angles, which we normally do on Tuesday. We shot them yesterday on Wednesday, and they're still not up yet. And the reason they're not up yet is because I've got a post-production load on this, especially on the backstage show, which really is just for our members and usually gets seen by about 300 people. But all of our episodes this week have to have three people. The show was called Trifecta and Right Angle. And when it looked like we couldn't get either one of them, I had a brief moment of thinking, well, maybe we just don't do it this week. Maybe we just can't pull it off. But then I realized we had started doing the trifectas at PJTV in 2008. I left the show when I went off to do Declaration Entertainment with Jeremy Boring, and they got a bunch of rotating guest hosts. And then I got back for Trifecta, and then I did some more afterburners there. But when we left PJTV because it was closing and came over here, um, we immediately did the right angles. And so I'm sitting here realizing that we've done this show for 15 years. Oh, Edward Smith, I got to interrupt myself. Was the Star Trek battle theme playing when I killed the dorm? You're damn well right it was. I had one of those curvy blades with the big blunt thing on the end, and it was dun 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 dun. So anyway, we'd been doing the shows for 17 years, 15 years, and in those 15 years, we had never missed a week, never, ever. So I decided that since we didn't have a host, I was going to really in a tight spot. So I got the Gorn captain to be the third seat in on our our right angles this week. So it's me, Steve Green, and the Gorn captain sitting in for Scott Ott or Alfonso Rachel. I took a big risk with this, but I had to do the show, and I didn't want to do just two because it wouldn't be trifecta, it wouldn't be right angle. Now, CP Tomes is getting me warmed up because he writes, was he civilized? So I actually was practicing it all day. Now, as a brief aside, what you see back there is actually this is the story of my life. This thing you see back here is a platform. I'm on an elevated platform here. And when we were doing the Stratosphere Lounge from the Stratosphere Lounge special alcove, which was, well, it's dark now, but that was lit up and it had a big, enormous, 14-foot wide Stratosphere Lounge thing, and did the show from there and had space chairs and everything. And people said, we don't like it. We want to see it back to the first person camera. So this thing you see behind me is a gigantic, enormous platform, which is, maybe a foot tall. And I'd asked the guy who did all of the work on this studio if I could get a platform built, and so he built one. But what he did, and you can't really fault him for this, was he built this thing with those, I'm going to make an idiot of myself. They're not 2x4s. They look like maybe 2x6s or 2x8s. In any event, you can see that he put those reinforcing boards in there every foot. I mean, right? So the long and the short of it is, this thing has been on the floor in my studio. I thought, wow, I've been wanting to move it forever. It weighs 800 pounds or something. Honestly, joists, thank you. 800 pounds. Honest to God, I couldn't pick it up by myself. I couldn't pick it up with two people by myself. But after a mere 7 months of waiting, they actually replaced our air conditioning today. And that was a lot of work. It's a big unit, and they had to go up above the drop ceiling, and they had to put one in the next room and put one in this room. So the first thing they had to do was be able to get to it. So these four guys came and tilted this thing up on its side. And I hadn't seen the bottom of this thing, and I thought, man, I've been probably thinking about moving this thing or just cutting it up for, wow, what's that, 4 or 5 years now? No, 9 years now, Bill, 9. And this thing sits right in the middle of the floor here. So we always have to walk around. It's been this way since I've been in the building. So there it was. I was going to cut this thing up. I was going to pay somebody to cut it up. I was just going to take a circular saw to it and just cut it up and not throw it away, because if I get them into little sections, then I can use them as stairs and stuff for motion capture and all kinds of cool things. But I could not lift the thing, and I never had 3 people here at the same time. Oh, thank you. Joe Cool says he's been, with Super Chat, says, been watching the old Stratosphere Lounge vids for the Obama versus Romney era. Very cool to look back on history. I remember that night very well. So I've had this gigantic platform that I've had to walk around for almost a decade because it was too heavy to do anything I couldn't cut it up because I didn't know where the supports were, the joists. But I did know that there were a bunch of them, and I didn't want to saw down the length of one of these things. So anyway, we not only got our new air conditioning, but now we've got this thing on its side. So now I can mark it and cut it and use those pieces, which are still going to be 150, 200 pounds each, but at least I can move those. So anyway, that was a big deal. So back to the Gorn. So I took a big risk on this, and here's what the risk was. I put him in the window, and our backstage show for members only usually runs about an hour. It's the only thing that we have that is just exclusively for the members in terms of product. We have a tremendously active forum, which I drop in on quite frequently, and everybody says leave a comment and let us know you're there. Well, it's certainly true. I just usually do it while I'm working on something else, or if I'm editing something, I'll just keep glancing at it. So there's a lot of activity there and some amazing posts from our members. So anyway, I've got this Gorn in the screen, and I've got him against a moving Star Trek background. And I forgot to mention why I did the whole song and dance about the walk-in show, so let me write that down because my memory is not something along those lines. Okay, so I put him in there, and now the problem is that you've got a character there, and he's got to say something. He can't just sit there. And if you've seen the Gorn regularly on our Stratosphere Lounge show, or the Right Angles for that matter, or the Stratosphere Studio show, you know he's not a terribly loquacious kind of guy. So earlier today, I'd spent some time working on the Gorn voice, which I can't do now because I need to hear it again. But it's very full of S's because he's a reptile, and he doesn't do this. He's a we will make it an easy death, or something like that, right? So I actually got it fairly close. So I'm going to run that through a couple of audio filters and give him kind of a sound. So he's there. Now I got to have him speak. And so we've got this 45-minute members-only show. And I had to have something for him to say. So I got out the writing thingy, and I did 3 pages of dialogue for the guy. As it turns out, Steve, we never know what we're going to talk about on the backstage show, and we obviously don't know what we're talking about when we're doing the right angles themselves. But Steve started talking about the fact that he was messing around with photo AI, with was it the something diffusion thing. And he had done a bunch of pictures of Chewbacca. He just got fascinated with Chewbacca. So I said, put those on a drive. So I got Steve talking about his AI thing. I've got all of his Chewbacca pictures, Chewbacca, at the White House and all that other stuff. And then I said I had a bunch of stuff, so I put up some of my Jack the Ripper stuff and some of the other stuff, the Cthulhu stuff and all the rest of it. Okay, so far so good. And then I said, this guy's got to have something. So then the Gorn captain says, would you like to see some of my pictures? And I said, sure. So I've got like 9 of them. I took the photo that the cutout was, still from the show of the guy in the whole bodysuit. Uploaded that to my little AI phone app, and did probably, 30 iterations of him in that costume. And so he's basically, I've got him narrating his own selfies. Actually thought that was rather funny. I really did. So every one of these pictures is slightly different, and I had to find out what the take on each one of them was, And so I wrote 24 captions that he will say, talking about these pictures of himself. And then I also did some stuff on the Stable Diffusion, did some stuff online, and then I did some pictures of, lizard men eating people. So by the time I'd finished the captions and stuff, I had a, I had kind of a character. I know what the Gorn Captain character was in the TV show, but I needed something that would, be at least interesting, if not hopefully funny. And so what ended up happening was, after I wrote these 27 captions, I went through the 45-minute backstage show, and Steve and I had worked out that we would intentionally leave a couple of moments of dead air for him to speak. But by and large, that's 2 or 3 times in 45 minutes wasn't enough. So I sat there, watched the whole show today, and anytime there was a moment that I could put a third person in there, it's just me and Steve talking, I would just write down the time code and I'd write a line of dialogue for this guy. And it felt exactly like, it felt exactly like what I imagine it felt like doing MST3K was. I was just watching this narrative and I was listening for cues, and then I said, I got something funny I can write about that. All this said and done, I don't know how effective or funny it's going to be. I hope it's going to do well. If it doesn't, it's not the end of the world. I didn't put a lot of super amount of resources into this. But I will tell you that this afternoon I had a lot of fun doing something I haven't done in a long time, and that was just writing jokes. I actually got paid to write jokes for quite a while. And I just loved it. So I was going to record the voice today, but we had the guys working on the air conditioning, so somewhere around 3:30 went home, took a nap, came back, and as soon as we're done here, at the end of this show, which I'm going to have to try to keep brief, and we all know that means probably going to go 4 hours. But I've got to record it tonight because it's already 2 days late. We normally put the members only backstage show usually goes up on Tuesday night, since we're recorded on a Tuesday morning. But it's pretty cool. And I would find myself just pitching in more and more. So I've got the still of the Gorn. I could have just done just the still. Could have just taken the thing from the screen grab from the episode, but that just seemed lazy. So I basically cut him out of the background. So now we've got, in one of these windows, we've got the Gorn Captain, pretty big close-up, same size as our other talking heads. And I wanted something to kind of make the frame dynamic, since he's not moving. He's actually two-dimensional. I know we're all two-dimensional, but he was two-dimensional when we recorded it. And so I gave him this animated starfield, which really helped bring him alive. And then I'm writing this dialogue for the guy, and obviously his mouth isn't moving, because his mouth didn't move even on the Star Trek episode. And I thought, I need some kind of visual something when he's talking. So I just went in, took that still that I was using, that was superimposed on Alpha Channel over the background, Starfield background. I took that into Photoshop, just put like a purple glow around the outside. So now whenever he talks, the still picture just lights up with a glow. Depending on how much work I want to put into this, I'll either have it just come on while he's talking, but knowing me, I'll probably try to make it work with the actual words, which means I'll be here till 4, and it's just the curse of the ruling class here. There's a time, and actually this will be something you can all relate to, no doubt. You'll all love this. Oh, by the way, I'm going to take the first 10 or 15 minutes of that members only backstage show. I'm going to tell the members this one particular one I really want to post, because we're talking about AI, and I thought it was kind of funny, so I'll take the most interesting stuff out of that, just 10 minutes of the 45 minutes, and slap it up, so you'll probably see that tomorrow or the next day. Which reminds me, I talk a lot about the planetarium days. I don't know if Phil's here watching, but Phil is basically my big brother that I never had, and he and I spent years there, and I ended up spending 20 years on and off before and after college there. So I learned a lot from that place. But one of the things that nothing was animated. So Jack Horkheimer would write scenes where like aliens would be talking, and we didn't have any aliens, and we didn't have any digital, way to influence the thing. So we would just put a couple of, like color diffusion effects up there, and I had two little dimmer pots. And when one guy was talking, I would do this, and when the other guy was talking, I would do this. And I swear, actually really works pretty well. It works, in fact, astonishingly well. So that's probably what I'm going to end up doing. I'm probably going to just like, I've got the Gorn Captain, and I'm just going to put the little glows on the syllables where he's talking, and it's going to be like, pop, 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 like he's talking. Again, it'll be probably another 9 hours or so. What are the Gorn's politics? I'm glad you asked, because in order to write jokes for a two-dimensional cardboard character who had maybe 3 lines in a series that was done nearly, 60 years ago? Yeah, pushing certainly 50 years ago, a little over. That was tough. So I had to. So you have to have an angle, right? That's the reason why I thought some of this stuff was actually funny. So I decided that the whole everything that he says, everything was going to be about exterminating the human race, the puny and weak human race. Everything was going to be about that, and I just thought it was great. I'm not going to try and do the voice here, but it's like I introduce him and I said, we can get Scott or Zoe. So anyway, we've invited the Gorn Captain to give us a perspective. So welcome to the show, Gorn Captain. And the first line was, "Hey, Bill, thanks for having me. Now prepare to die, you weak, inferior, soft-skinned ground apes. Your time is over. The time of the Gorn has come at last," and that kind of thing. So it's like, yeah. There's one of the pictures where he's like just got this smile on his face, and that's what the AI generated was a smiling T-Rex face kind of thing. And when he's talking about that picture, this one, I remember this day. It caught me in a really good mood. I just looked up and they were executing some children just a few yards behind the camera. What a great day that was. And I just went down that road and I just loved it. I thought it was fantastic. And somehow or another, a reference to the Star Trek show came up. And so that's when I added like a kind of a second running joke. I didn't overuse it. I used it maybe 3 or 4 times. It's like, you humans are so sad and pink and pathetic and weak, except for the one named Kirk. Tell us where the one named Kirk is. So he just constantly wants to know where Kirk is because he's doing that. Now, Steve, in all of our right angle shows, has, by happy coincidence, on his shelf behind him, a 3-dimensional Gorn head. And I don't know if he mentioned this on the show. So he's got this 3-dimensional Gorn head, and it's a wearable mask. And he painted like a pencil-thin mustache on it. I said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "I got the mask because I went out as Halloween, and I took the Gorn mask, and I wore like like an old Southern gentleman kind of outfit, and I did Gorn with the wind." And I thought, that's bloody brilliant. So when we were recording this thing, I tossed to Steve. I said, "Oh, by the way, just got a text from our third window here. He wants to know what the head of his cousin is doing on your shelf there." And Steve says he's not going to reply, and I had the Gorn say something like, I got to get this, really. "Yes, that is Ronaldo of my blood cohort. I've known him since the spawning pools. If you took his head in battle, I will spare your life and make you my sanitation slave." I thought, yeah, make you my slave, that's not good, but probably better than being poleaxed. But sanitation slave, that's something else completely. So anyway, that's how the random assortment of cliches and half-baked ideas that I try to sell as a sense of creativity works, and I liked it. So we'll see how it works. We'll see. So anyway, I was, as usual, got distracted. I distracted myself. At the beginning of the show, I was mentioning that we always do this walk-in, and we usually have these animated shows that were real important to me, and I have to do some new ones because Wild Wild West isn't in there, and that's a criminal oversight. Um, but I also have a bunch of other individual pieces of music which I'll use if I need to extend, or sometimes if I'm actually here, I'll just run a bunch of them together, so it's a little different. And the one that we use, because it's nice and long, it's about 7 minutes, is Weird Al Yankovic's song about the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota. And I actually wanted to talk about that fairly seriously for a minute. Um, I don't know how many of you know the song. I would play it, but I don't want to get the copyright hit, and lose the 48 cents I'll probably make on this show. But it's a great song, and I really wanted to talk about it because the whole song is about Weird Al's trip to see the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota back in the 50s, back in the days when we were doing road trips, and I'll talk a little more about the big upcoming Ultimate Boomer road trip in a minute. And he says that they wanted to go see the biggest ball of twine. It was a family summer vacation. That's what you did when I was a kid. For summer vacations, you would get in a car and just go someplace. I just want to see what the lyric was, because this is what actually got me thinking about something. It's a really fun song. All right, so here's the lyrics. And he says, and it's every single cliche possible. We had pickled wieners that put on a Slim Whitman tape. Kids are saying, "Are we there yet?" But this is the part that actually got me thinking. Um, okay, so they're on their way to the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota, and they say it's so scenic outside of the car, but they can't see anything out of the car because of all the decals on the windows from the places that they'd already been. And that's part of my childhood too. You get a road trip, and you get a decal, and so this is all they did was pile in the station wagon, this family, and go see all these other places. But this is what actually got me thinking. Um, in Florida, where I grew up, spent ages 12 to 28, something like that, longer actually. University of Florida is north of Orlando by about an hour and a half, and especially at the time, there were all kinds of tourist attractions on the spine of Florida. This is before Disneyland or Disney World really came in and completely upped the game, but they had all these weird, weird little things. Even when I got to Miami, none of them are still there, I don't think. They had parrot jungle and monkey jungle, and they had, there's like the citrus tower, and then there's it just tons and tons and tons of this stuff just designed to stop people who are going by on the road and vacuum their money out. And so he's got a line where he says, couldn't see out of the side of the car because the windows were completely covered with the decals from all the places where we've already been. Now, there's a bigger point to this, political point, believe it or not. And so he lists some of these places. Now, I don't know if these are real. And this is kind of the point of what I'm going at. They might be, because these things are just so bizarre, like the wacky house, or they're just. I'll get to that. So he's listing the places they've already been. He says, like the Elvis-O-Rama, the Tupperware Museum, the Boll Weevil Monument and Cranberry World, the Shuffleboard Hall of Fame, Poodle Dog Rock, and Mecca of albino squirrels. We've been to ghost towns, theme parks, wax museums, and a place where you can drive through the middle of a tree, seen an alligator farms and tarantula ranches, but there's still one thing we got to see. So, what's the whole point of all of this? The whole song can be read as a critique of the sheer banality and crassness of American consumer culture. That this is, you could read it as this is him commenting on, oh, so this is what we have for culture. The French have, Versailles, and the Russians have, L'Hermitage and stuff, and we've got the kingdom of albino squirrels. And this is the point. And I thought about this quite a bit because I've heard the song 200,000 times. No exaggeration. And I thought, is Weird Al, he's making a comment. Is he bashing America or not? And I came to realize, no, I don't know for a certain fact, but I bet a significant amount of the money that I don't have, that what he's doing is he's celebrating it. He gets it, right? He really loves it, I think. And this goes to the political point I want to make. I heard Mark Dice on this, and was it Mark Dice? I think it was Mark Dice. With this whole Bud Light thing, and all of the woke stuff, all of the Disney stuff, all of the stuff that was done to Star Trek and Star Wars, I'm not going to go through all of that again. By the way, I start telling some story on the backstage show in the Gornses. I've heard this story 300 times. I'm going to eliminate waste materials. I'll be back in a moment. I just get him out of frame. I got him out of frame because I didn't want to have to write lines for him for 3 minutes. So I don't think that Weird Al is making a negative comment on it. I think he's making a loving comment on it. And if he's not, I'd be damn amazed. Because even though the whole song is about how trivial and trite it is, and even though he's making fun of this magnificent, golden sphere in a cheap pagoda, he's Quibo says he's mocking Americans. He is, but I don't think he's doing it in a negative way. I think he's actually kind of celebrating it. And when you think about this Bud Light thing, and if you've seen the woman who's responsible for this greatest marketing catastrophe since New Coke, you can hear her saying, well, when I took over as vice president of Bud Light, undoubtedly the first woman president of Bud Light, we had a dying brand and no one was drinking it. And if we couldn't get young people to drink Bud Light, then Bud Light was going to die as a brand. So therefore, I decided to go with, not only Dylan Mulvaney, but Amy Schumer and what's the name, Seth Rogen, talking about pay inequality while they're drinking beer. I'm going to appeal to young people by making this thing as woke as it possibly can be. And I realized this is the difference, right? This is the difference between not only these different generations, but this whole different view on America. Weird Al, in Biggest Ball of Twine, in a twine ball or whatever it's called, Weird Al is looking at the kind of the shabby edges of American consumerism, and he's doing it lovingly. He spends like 3 entire stanzas on why a guy would make the biggest ball of twine in the world. And he does it, I think, because he loves America. He loves America. And this woman hates America. And this is what I think it was Mark Dice was on. He's like, the people who are in charge of these corporations, these young people now, and I say corporations, the people who make Star Wars now hate Star Wars. The people that make Star Trek now hate Star Trek. The people that make Bud Light hate people that drink Bud Light. They all hate it. They just hate it. And they've been given the reins of it, and they're just, well, here's my chance to advance the progressive agenda. They don't think of the progressive agenda as a political thing. It's like, here's my chance to fix this horribly, horribly broken, evil, patriarchal, misogynist, transphobic, homophobic, racist nightmare called America. So I will beat you over the head with things like Dylan Mulvaney until you change your attitudes about this and lovingly and willingly and enthusiastically endorse the idea of, lopping parts off of 12-year-olds. And this is the difference between the two. Weird Al Yankovic can look at there's only one word for this, and I don't know why I didn't think of it earlier, the tackiest part of America and say, this is wonderful. And again, I didn't ask him about the song, but I have heard it a number of times. I think what he's really basically saying is, it's just great that in this country, you can have like a weird obsession or hobby and hang a sign out on the side of the road, and you'll get people to come and pay to see it. Now, I don't know if anybody has ever driven 20 hours or whatever it was in the song in order to see the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota. I suppose it's possible, but I doubt it. Usually, what these things are is you've got a family of kids, mom and dad, and four kids. Everybody had four kids, and they're all screaming and yelling, and they're going from here to there, and they've got a 9-hour trip that day, that leg. And somewhere along the line, they start seeing these billboards for the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota, or Alligator Farm, or the house with inverted gravity, or whatever. And some percentage of people just decide, okay, let's have a look at it. Some of the adults think that could be kind of interesting. I suspect most of it is driven by kids saying, I want to see the twine ball. Okay, we could all use a chance to stretch our legs. So who loses here, right? I mean, you do see something that's unusual. I have not seen the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota. I don't think I would have the kind of ecstatic reaction that the song provides. But clearly, Big Al has seen the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota, and it made enough of an impression on him to record this 6 or 7 minute song. Mermaid Park in Florida, just Mystery Spot. That's the one I was thinking of. Thank you very much there, AOC. It's all of these things. South of the border in 5 miles. South of the border, Eric, are you talking about the one between, is that North and South Carolina on I-95? Is that the one you're talking about? So there's this, of all of the ones in terms of promotion, south of the border was the one that had the most money. If I used to drive from Florida to Pennsylvania to visit my dad, and that was about a 15, 16-hour drive, if I remember correctly. And you're going either north or south on I-95, and starting something like 140 miles away, you start seeing these ads for south of the border, and it's a Mexican guy with sombrero. Undoubtedly, that's under attack now. And they just keep building it up. And you just start seeing more and more and more of these billboards. You're thinking, holy crap, it's got to be something, man. And so you're breezing past this thing, and all it is just a CP Tubs. It's the world's largest truck stop. It's a truck stop, and it's got all the things you would get at any of the other truck stops, but it's got, some kind of, plaster frescoed kind of Eskimo thing, with a rocket coming out of it or something like that. It's the Arctic Command Center or whatever. People go. And I just think it's just really, really cool. No one's making you go. People say it. That's a good word for it too, by the way, Lady Hawk. Kitschy. Yeah, okay. No one's making you go, and it's not like it's outside your window and you have to deal with it every day. I just love it. And the thing about the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota is the smaller the attraction is, the kind of like the more amateur and homemade it is, the better I like it. And that is not going away. Most of it has gone away. I remember driving through Florida, my God, 10, 15 years ago at least, more than that probably, and wondering where all these cool little places had gone. And they just went out of business, I think they must all be pretty much out of business because nobody gets bored in a car ride anymore, right? Why would you ever get bored in a car ride now? Now you just sit back and watch whatever movies you want to, or you talk to your friends, or you work on something. You got all these devices, which is why we decided that when the four of us, who all worked at the Miami Planetarium together starting in 1974, and these guys, Fritz and Steve and Phil, have been my friends for, half a century. When we do this car ride, we're not gonna use our devices. We're just gonna talk to each other and probably, figure out what to do to pass the time, like play the license plate game and the rest of it. So, oh my God. Astronerd says there are signs for south of the border in Minnesota. That's on the North-South Carolina border. And so the thing I think, just to kind of put a button on this whole thing, the thing I like about the tackiness of these things is that they belong to the people. they're owned by not the people. They're owned by. I shouldn't say they belong to people. The people. They belong to people. Some guy's got a big old string. His uncle collected string for 65 years, and now it's relatively impressive, big enough to maybe get some people to stop. So hangs out a couple signs, and next thing you know, he's making some money on this every day. Um, and the idea that you could live in a country that's free enough to do that, like, you know, you you do a lot of work on ships in a bottle out there in your shack, and over the course of working on this for 70 years, you have the largest collection of toenail clippings in all of America. Look at it; it's in 7 jars. Okay, hang out a sign. How many people are going to come? Well, the world's largest toenail clipping collection is probably not going to draw the same kind of numbers that the biggest twine ball is, but you'd get some, right? Mostly you'd get people want to stretch their legs or whatever. So I don't know. I miss it, and I miss the road culture. And now there you go. P7 2017 speaks up occasionally. In fact, usually has something very interesting to say. Got a quote from Route 66. If you ever try to motor west, travel my way, take the highway. That's the best. Get your kicks on Route 66. That entire road culture is more important than it seems, because road culture is freedom. Uh, and it really is. It's freedom. In this country, it's still legally true. I just don't think it's very culturally true anymore. And I find this to be sad. It's not like these damn kids. It's like, I think you guys are missing out on something. And I don't want this whole thing to be about when I was a boy, but, when I was a boy, when you turned 16 years old, and if you'd saved a couple $100s, you suddenly had absolute freedom, and you had privacy. I mean, really, you had privacy and freedom. You could not only go places, you could also stay parked in places. And I miss it a lot. And the great irony, of course, is that now, like, I've had two of the new model Camaros at 2012 and 2018. It's the same body style. The only reason I loved the 2012, loved it better than the 2018, and the only reason I got the swap was because about 5 months after the warranty expired on the 12, the air conditioning stopped working, and it was 111 degrees here in Los Angeles. So I said, okay, no problem. Air conditioning goes out. This warranty's over. That's fine. Lay out a couple $100, and I take it to the dealer or whatever, and he says, yeah, turns out there's a solenoid in there that's going to have to be replaced. Okay, so what's that going to cost? Well, in order to get to the solenoid, we have to remove the windshield. I thought, oh, that's great. And we also have to remove the entire dashboard. What? Yeah, we got to take the windshield off first, and we got to take the dashboard out. And we have to crawl in here and do this other thing and order this part. I said, what's this going to cost? He said, $6,000. That's not an exaggeration. $6,000 to repair this air conditioning. And I thought, I've been driving used cars my entire life. And you save some money, obviously. But when you I cannot tell you. It's at least 10 years. I bet it was more like 20 years, at least 20 years, probably even pushing 30. Probably 20 years of my life, without question 20 years of my life, I bought retreads. That's just what I did. I mean, I couldn't afford anything else. I remember when I got this new Camaro. It was the first new car I ever had. I was what was that? So I was 53 when I first had my first new car. And when it needed new tires, I went out and bought 4 new tires, thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. But I'd spend as much time, practically as much money fixing the used cars that I had, that I would buy these cars at 60, 70, 80,000 miles. But the irony is that the cars that we actually did the road trips in were excruciatingly uncomfortable. These two Camaros have got these unbelievable seats. I've driven that car from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. Before I got married, I did it in one. I just did it. I didn't have to stop or anything. And you don't have that kind of, my God, if I don't get up and walk, my ass is going to kill me. It's going to just going to leave. Horrifically uncomfortable cars. We did the road trips that I remember the most. One of them was in my friend's about a 74, 75, 76 Ford Maverick. And that car not only did not have lumbar back support, it had a lumbar void. It had a big bench seat, and the vertical cushion did that, and then the horizontal cushion did that, which meant that there was this gigantic hole where your smaller your back is. And I remember in that car, in that damn Maverick, we didn't even get out of Miami, and we were already dying. So we just pile 400 pillows in there and just try to sort it out. Now these cars they're fantastically comfortable, but who does it? I don't know. I don't miss it. I lived it. I genuinely think that young people, and when I say young people, I mean young men. This is a guy thing. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I've never heard of a bunch of girls going on a 3-day road trip where nobody sleeps and one guy's driving, one guy's talking, and one guy's sleeping kind of thing. 73 Gremlin, yeah, okay, I'm with you, man. I remember those things real well. It was really magic, but the thing I think I feel sorry for the most is that sense of, this is why we got our driver's licenses on the morning of our 16th birthday, right? When can I get my license? When you turn 16. What time do you open? 8 a.m. Well, then I got my driver's license at 8:12 a.m. on my 16th birthday, because it wasn't just transportation. It was freedom. This is mine. This is my little bubble. I can take it wherever I want to. I'm making $2.20 an hour, and gasoline was costing about that. So, I'm making a couple hundred miles an hour of distance. Save your money and just go. People are talking about the Gremlins, and what was that other thing that was really kind of out there looking? Another AMC car. What was that? Kind of real bubble looking. It wasn't the Gremlin. The Gremlin looked like somebody pinched off the back end. The Pacer. Yeah. The Pacer I actually thought was pretty cool. And somebody in the comment section mentioned this. It's our friend AOC again. He said, so that's a Matador. In my humble opinion, the AMC Matador is the ugliest car that has ever been manufactured in these United States. From the rear, the Matador looks like it basically crapped its pants. I thought the Pacer was kind of different, but the Matador was a special kind of ugly, and no one's going to believe me unless I show them. That Matador from the back, honest to God, every time I saw one, I was ashamed to be an American. Let's see. Somehow it's not quite as ugly as I remember it being, but let's see if I can find a good example of it. Just a freaking horror. That's kind of close. It's not really what I'm looking for. Yeah. This will give you some idea. Really need, yeah, maybe this. Yeah. So for those of you who were not fortunate enough to have been born in time to see the magnificent Matador on the actual roads, these were the incredibly sleek and elegant lines. That's the second. Why is that doing that? It did this to me last time. Let's try it again. I think it's because the rear window, side windows end over the wheel, and there's just so much more of it behind that point. But I just found this. Yeah, here's a better example. I just find this car to be absolutely stunningly, shockingly, appallingly ugly. And when you see one in real 3D, it really hits you. Even though this one has an incredibly cool vinyl roof. Tell me that car doesn't look like it's just kind of carrying a load behind it, like it just didn't get there in time. And that kind of notch on the back window is a little weird. Here's the thing about those vinyl roofs; they're very popular, and they look kind of cool for about, in Florida, you might get a year out of them, and after that, it just became a source of peeling plastic. It just plain turned into a fabric distribution vehicle. You just peel that vinyl roof, just peel it off. Has character though. Well, I got this here. I'll find my first car, which is I got when I was 16. I loved it so much. Yeah, baby. I still look at this car and I still can't believe how damn good looking this thing was, and that I actually owned one of these when I was 16. Still got pictures of it too, actually, somewhere. I think the actual car. Come on. Here it is. This, my friends, is a 1970 Chevy Camaro. And I had one, I bought the 1970 Chevy Camaro in 1976, used, obviously. And that is a fantastic looking car, especially with those little half bumpers, you know? They didn't put the bumper in front of the chrome, in front of the grille. It's just cool. And these were before impact bumpers, you know? Nowadays you hit something and that bumper's supposed to take a little bit of the damage, although the front of my car is just plastic, it just wrinkles. But not on these, man. On this one, it's like, nah, to hell with it. You know, we're not going to hit anything. We're driving a car like this, we're not going to hit nothing. So just pull it all the way up to its magnificent full resolution. Yeah. So, yeah, there was that. And I don't recall that there were any headrests in there either. So, lap belts. I think I see shoulder belts in there conceivably. Two separate belts, by the way, not the 3-point harness that I think Saab invented and then made free for everybody without enforcing their patent on it, which was pretty cool. But it was just great. And it had a square shifter. It was I had an automatic, but it had a square. Now, that's what I remember about the inside of the car. Hang on a second. And I just was as happy as a kid could be, honestly, because the internet will be the death of all of us, but before that happens, it sure is cool. Look at this. This is wicked, man. Look at this thing. This is how you put that baby into drive. Come on. Yeah. How badass is that thing? That's just frickin' cool. Anyway, so that's the whole twine ball thing, and it is pertinent to today. You know, these people don't. It does look like a jet throttle, which is exactly why I like it, hose. These people. These young people, young executives, not everybody young, not every young person by any means, but they hate it. They hate this country. They hate everything about it. And they're convinced that everything is better everywhere else, anywhere else, and yet they never go. And if they do go, they come right back home again. And I just think that the biggest ball and twine in Minnesota is a magnificent statement about freedom and about individuality. That's the word I'm looking for. So there's your lead-in rant for the day. And yeah. So anyway, so we're going to do the road trip. I think I might have reported on this. There are emails that I haven't caught up with yet, so I've had two or three replies to this. If you're one of the four people that will be in the car, I'm not up on the latest. Three on the column, yeah. Barbara Durand, they called that three on the tree. It was a manual shifter on the column. I remember that from a friend's Dart, Dodge Dart, I want to say. Three on the tree. What a goddamn awful way to live through things. So we're going to do the road trip. My friend Steve, who I did most of my road tripping with, suggested 9 days. 9 day trip, and he had it all blocked out. We'll go from here to here. That'll be a 7 hour drive. Then we'll stop for the night. And then we'll do this, and then we'll do this, and we'll do this. We are going to be at the Air Force Museum in Dayton, and we will announce that time. So if you're in the mood to go and visit the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota, and you want to divert to the Air Force Museum, we will let you know what day we will be there, because I'm looking forward to seeing as many of you as can make it. But I looked at this thing. I said, well, first of all, I can't be gone for 9 days. This will be the first time I've gone on a vacation since certainly 2019. Just me goofing off by myself with some friends for the first time in probably 30 years. Come back with postcards for a slideshow. I love slideshows. So he came back with that. And I said, look, I don't want you to take this personally, Steve, because you put a lot of work into this, and I really appreciate it, because you really did think it out. You got all the times measured and the distances and all the rest of it. I'm going to fly to Orlando. We're going to drive from Orlando. Steve is going to pick me up in Orlando. We're going to go from Orlando up to my friend Fritz in Georgia. From Georgia, we're going to go a relatively short trip over to get Phil in North Carolina, and then we're all going to head up to Ohio, Dayton, and then we're going to just reverse the route back. You put nine days. I said, Steve, it's great. Drive 7 hours, get a motel, relax. This is the gayest schedule I can possibly imagine. I'm embarrassed to look at this. Embarrassed. So I sent him back my version, which I thought was pretty slack. That was a 4-day, 4-night, 5-day, 4-night trip. CB Tomes wants to know, what day are we going to the Air Force Museum? I don't know. I'm virtually positive it will be a Sunday, because I cannot miss either one of the right angles, which we shoot on Tuesday. So I got to leave after Tuesday, and I got to be back by Monday night. Denton, Georgia is where we're stopping. At my friend's Fritz had a nice place with a couple of horses in a relatively, I guess, half an acre or something here in Los Angeles. And he moved to Georgia 5-6 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago, and he bought Terra. He has an estate now with the money he made from selling this house in California. So we will do that. Why not? Eric wants to know, why not do it while on the road? Because I don't want to bring that. I don't want to bring the internet into the car, Eric. That's the honest reason. So I came back with Steve from Steve's 9-day thing, and I said, this is not what I had in mind, guys. This incredible itinerary that you've laid out includes no discomfort at all. There's no exhaustion. There's no misery. There's no boredom. This won't do, man. We gotta do something to rough this thing up. So I was basically saying, well, we just need to chop this thing in half or more. And so I was saying, okay, so we get up early. We spend the night in Dayton, get up early, see the Air Force Museum, leave around 5 or 6, get something to eat, and then we drive down to Phil's house. That's 7 hours. So what, we get there maybe 2, 3 in the morning? That's nothing. Do that in my sleep. So I will have the itinerary by the end of the weekend, because it looks like it's going to be last week in April. I need to buy some tickets. And I don't want to say anything about being able to meet people on the route, because I don't know where we're going to stop for food. And that's a little bit too difficult. If we get delayed, I'd feel horrible. If people drove some distance to meet it south of the border or something like that. But we will be at the Air Force Museum, I think, on opening of the Air Force Museum, and I think we're going to do it on a Sunday. Saturday or Sunday. So we'd love to see as many people as could be there. That would just be really fun. Um, and then, so I was basically saying, all right, look, Steve's got this brand huge, incredible SUV. Says the best car he's ever owned, and he's had about 30. He started leasing when I was 23 or something. He just gets a new car every 2 years. He said, he said, it's just absolutely incredible car. And I said, okay, well, if it's such an incredible car, why are we spending all this time staying in motels? Somebody's driving, somebody's talking, somebody's sleeping. That's how it works. The talking guy is keeping the driver awake. The sleeping guy is catching up. Oh, hey, there's Phil. Um, and you know, let's just make a if we're going to try and recover our, when I say lost youth, I'm speaking about those three. Uh, but yeah, if you're not miserable, it's not a road trip. When I say miserable, I mean euphorically happy, but physically uncomfortable. And we'll have to remember all of those, you know, puzzle games like, a man walks up to his car that's locked and he says, I can't do this, my son is because my child's a doctor or whatever the hell that thing is. Um, and so we're gonna, yeah, butt ache is necessary. Eric, that's it. That's it. If there's no butt ache involved in this, then it's not a road trip. And in a car this modern, I can't see us not developing butt ache unless we're doing 10, 12, 14 hours of driving, something like that. Now, that's a good point. Furball 321 says miserable in your 60s is different than miserable in your 20s. I think Steve had probably factored that in, but I haven't. Um, and and I think that's actually going to be quite depressing. But I don't care. I'm just going to tough it out because my feeling is if I could do it when I was 20 and I can do it now that I just turned 64, then that means I'll live forever. Um, so that's the plan anyway. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be fun. Um, I just need to get to this real quick. I saw it go flashing by on YouTube from Caledon Sockley. Bill, if you wanted to get into flying, would you recommend learning to glide first? I mentioned earlier that when I start telling a story in the Right Angle Show, the Gorn excuses himself because he's heard it 30 times. So I'm not going to give you the whole story, but I'd like to do another flying episode. And the answer is, Caledon, I don't believe in coercion of any kind, but I do believe in persuasion. And if I was running the FAA, I would, or if I had the ear of the country, I would say that the desirability of learning to fly a glider before a powered airplane is so high that I just this short of making it mandatory. I really mean it. Um, Eric says the Shakespeare episode. No, that didn't go over so well. I remember people talking about dogs or something while I was trying to do the Shakespeare thing. Yes, um, yes. Anybody who wants to learn how to fly, at least get to the point where you can solo in a glider. Don't If you can do it, if you're capable of starting with a blank piece of paper, don't even take a lesson in a powered airplane until you're able to solo in a glider, because you learn you have to know what the air is doing. You have to know where you are. You're constantly looking for places where you can land when the engine quits because there is no engine. All the rest of it. There's 100 reasons for it, Caledon. There's no confusion between pitch and airspeed because there's no engine to throw you off. There's no electrical system. There's no radios in most of them, and much more importantly than all of this, Caledon, I am really I have an exceptional flying history because I truly, 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 honestly I've never met any other pilots that had an engine failure in a single engine airplane, and I've had three. Um, and when that happens, when you're just buzzing along your, oh, um, CP Tomes, you know Mark Zeitlin? Mark Zeitlin did the repairs on my long easy. Mark is a great guy. I really, really like him very much. I miss him an awful lot. Funny you mentioned that name. I'm really glad to hear that name. I haven't thought of him, or I've thought of him occasionally. I haven't seen him since we sold the plane back in 2016. So self-powered gliders, yeah, I didn't particularly get anything out of those. But Kaladin, the thing about it is, man, in all three of those cases, when that engine goes out, you feel it. I mean, you just like feel it's like a rat starts gnawing at your ankles. And in all three of those cases, it was like a lever. It was so clear to me. Okay, well, you just lost your engine, and now you're in a glider. Fortunately for you, Bill, you're a glider pilot, and you've landed without an engine 232 times. So this will be 233. No different than anything else. Glide ratio is not as good, so be sure to conserve energy. Keep it close to the field and dump airspeed when you know you've got it made. And all three of them were just not non-events. I have not heard of Mark's lost propeller talk. Mark Zeitlin is when I saw him last. Again, it was 2016. I want to say, it's based at Tehachapi Airport and shared a hangar with an aviation legend, who also came down to work on my airplane for free. And that's a guy who I admire enormously, named Mike Melville. He's the first civilian astronaut and one of the best people I ever met, and flown around the world in a single engine long easy with Dick Rutan. And Mike Melville stick flew Spaceship One into by God outer space. He did it 4, 5, 6 times, I think. Brian Binney's a real good guy too. He's another astronaut that I know. Not a great thing to say. A couple of astronauts that I know. Yeah, I can hang out with a guy who was the first civilian, private citizen rather, to fly in space at the controls. That was pretty cool. All right, so let's move on. I think we've probably had enough of this stuff. Get the glider, man. Wherever you have to go for it, do it. And I mean, for really great soaring, that's what we used to call it, you need to be either close to a ridge, like a relatively small mountain range, or you need to be someplace hot like the Mojave Desert or Florida. But even if you're not there, even if you're just doing sleigh rides where the tow plane tows you to 5,000 feet, you release, and then you just glide back down again, you're not getting any lift. It doesn't matter. Get the glider. Get to the point where you can at least solo in the glider, and if you're getting that far, you really should. Brian Binney passed away not too long ago? No. Oh, no. We were supposed to get together and have lunch. Sorry for the, I almost said dead air. I don't see, I don't see cause of death here. September of 22. Hang on, I'm sorry. It says cause of death was not stated. That's that sucks. Um, Anybody know what happened? Uh, well, I'll tell you something. Um, I don't feel the slightest bit sad about this. I really don't. He's 69 years old. Brian Binney was a by God frickin' astronaut, and anybody who gets that close to a dream led a good life, and it's not about length; it's about volume. Good for him. Good for him. Good for him. And thank you for letting me know. Some people are apologizing. It's like, no, I'm glad I just didn't hear that. I still don't know why. Uh, oh well. Brian Binney has flown west, and uh, not all of us will fly west, but some of us will. Uh, I've been tooling around a little bit with DCS. I still have to get final payments before I can really, you know, get things straightened out financially here before I can really go deep into it. But I have been messing around with it a little bit, and and there's so many DCS as a DCS digital combat system of flight simulator, extremely high fidelity flight simulator, about as close to getting being a real fighter pilot as you're likely to get, and there are so many different channels out there, and I'm looking at these things, and I thought, in my abundant free time, I might have something to say. Um, Having just dicked around with it a little bit, I actually thought I might do a series. This is not for us necessarily, but there are a lot of great DCS channels out there, and 200. Um, ooh, Eric says, by the way, Bill, you're looking for a name for your Matt Mason character. How about Mace Mattingly? Eric, you occasionally come up with the coolest ideas. I still think Blood Red was a great title, even though it was rejected. Mace Mattingly is frickin' perfect. Mace can be his call sign. It's just perfect, 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 perfect. Um, Thank you for that. Uh, Mace Mattingly is. If anybody else can give me three others, that's perfect where I'm going. We talked about the blast hard cheese kind of thing. That's their joke. It's not mine. But anyway, um, well, Brian, they said Marisha said that Brian's family planned to bury him at Arlington. He'll be there with my dad, uh, who was the first person to say he was not any kind of hero. He just got a call. He didn't get a call. He signed up to join the army, and he got rejected for a hernia, and then he got the hernia treated, and then he joined the army and signed up to go, and so that meant he could. His ashes are interred at Arlington. A lot of good people there. Um, Monk in Training says thoughts on the Tomcat in comparison to the F-15. Yeah, I don't want to make this all about flying, but it's not really media either. So I know there's going to be a lot of eye rolling right around this point. But yeah, I will do that. I'm for people who are feeling like either sad that they let me know about this or God, not another aviation thing. You know what? That's really not fair to do. Can you bring that back? Can we talk airplanes on Monday night? Um, because this really is the political show, and when I get on airplanes, if you like airplanes, it's fantastic. So cardiovascular failure. Okay. He's about as fit as a person could be. Now, so was Kevin Samuelson, for that matter. I just had I just had evil thoughts running through my mind, and I don't like that I have to deal with this kind of speculation, even if I don't say anything about it. All right. So yeah. So a couple people have commented. I didn't see anything of the story other than the bullet point of this enormous Pentagon leak, top level stuff. I don't know how bad it's going to be. I can't imagine it'd be worse than Walker, because I'm still working on that episode. Um, Part of this has to do with the specificity of the episode, but I've been working on the notes for my favorite of the Cold War episodes, episode 9, called Cloak and Daggers, all about the spying game and SR-71s and Project Corona, and then Operation Azorian. And honestly, I'm a little bit past halfway, and I have made 350 notes, and virtually all of them include a link to the correct uh, picture or whatever. Um, this is defense related, and I'll get to this with this younger person. There were so many corrections I had to make in this. I would be talking about something in the Cold War, and this editor would use uh, footage from World War One, World War One soldiers marching around, that kind of thing. A number of cases like this. And when I talked to the producer about it, I said, does he just not care? He said, no, Bill, it's not that he doesn't care. He just doesn't know. He's a young guy, and he just doesn't know. He doesn't know what World War II is, or the Cold War, or World War One. If you say soldiers, then he'll put in soldiers. And I thought, wow, man, it's a real problem. Um, so on the end of the Cloak and Dagger episode, which is my favorite, I need to get those notes in because they're getting time to point of no return on this thing. Um, the That whole episode is about American technological supremacy. It's about the U-2, which is a remarkable airplane. It's about the U-2 getting shot down. The U-2 flew high and very slowly. One of the most amazing things about the U-2 is that it is so fragile, like the lunar module's fragile, that when the U-2 is at cruising altitude, I don't have the exact numbers, but they're something close to this. The air is so thin that when the U-2 is at its cruising altitude, it will stall, the wings will stall, it'll fall out of the sky at anything slower than 117 knots indicated. Plane's going faster than that over the ground. It's not a fast plane, but it's going faster than that over the ground. Indicated airspeed is what the airplane feels because it's doing 117 knots because the air feels like 117 knots because it's so thin up there. So if the pilot lets the plane get below 117 knots, he'll stall the airplane and probably go into an unrecoverable spin, or the wings will come off. But if he exceeds 123 knots, then he's crossed the red line. He's flying VNE faster than the never exceed speed. The U-2 at cruising altitude has a 6-knot window of stability, and that pilot has to keep the entire mission there, because if not, that plane's going to crash, and he's going to chances of surviving an ejection at 70,000 feet probably not great. So the U-2 flew very high, and it did it real early, but it was slow. And when they shot down Francis Gary Powers, it was the last U-2 flight over the Soviet Union. It blew about all kinds of things. There was a huge summit that was going to happen between Eisenhower and Khrushchev, and this thing just killed it. Might have put the Cold War to bed in 1961, maybe, possibly 1960, somewhere around there. Uh, so they went to Kelly Johnson, who, along with Burt Rutan, are the two greatest aircraft designers in the world, in the history of the world, and they said, we need a U-2 version 2, and Kelly Johnson said, I'm not going to do something to be obsolete by the time it's on the runway. If we're going to do something new, let's do something new. So he designed the A-12, which became the sister of the SR-71. A-12 is cooler looking than the SR-71. It's a little bit faster, too. Did he survive? The pilot, the U-2 pilot did survive. Francis Gary Powers was his name, and he had a cyanide pill which he didn't take, and so they put him on trial in the Soviet Union. It was one of the worst public relations disasters of the Cold War. So Kelly Johnson in the mid-60s designed the fastest airplane in the history of the world. He was halfway through the time between the Wright brothers and today. He was prior to halfway, and he built the SR-71, which is amazing in its anti-reflective black paint. It's radar absorbing paint. The SR-71 was a stealth aircraft. But at the museum here in Los Angeles, they've got an SR-71, and they've got it without the paint. And in its raw titanium, you actually have to see this. I'm not going to make this about airplanes. I'm making it about secrets and military and this 20-year-old. But this you have to see. Because the SR-71A12 without its paint is even more impressive. I had no idea. I'd never seen one unpainted before. But when I saw this thing at the museum here in Los Angeles, just trying to find which one of these stunning photographs. All right, I need something a little bit closer because you can't really quite make out the details. It's just actually unbelievable. Okay, none of them are really doing it justice, but this will get you close. This is what an unpainted SR-71 looks like in its naked titanium. Now, those of you who are fans of the Star Trek movies, tell me that this doesn't look exactly like the Aztecing on one of the Klingon ships. Look at those triangles and how those things fit together. It's, when you see it in person, it's beyond imagination how advanced that airplane looks and is. Anyway, my whole point with this is that whole episode about spying during the Cold War was about the U-2, which was a technological marvel, the SR-71, which is even more of a technological marvel, and then the Project Corona. We launched, I want to say it was 11 attempts before we finally got a spy satellite to actually do what it's supposed to do. The Thor Agena rocket booster just kept failing. They just kept doing it, and they finally got it right. And the first spy satellites, television was so primitive that a television image would have been useless. So they put up a spy satellite, and it would take pictures, and then those photos would become part of a reentry package, and this thing would shoot this capsule out of this gigantic spy satellite the size of a bus, and it would re-enter the atmosphere, and a parachute would open, and then a C-130 or something like that, relatively slow airplane, would fly, and it had something on its whiskers looked like a catfish, and it would just grab this thing out of the air and take it down and land, and they developed that film and so on. So that was an amazing miracle. And then the heart of that episode is about Project Azorian, where we discovered that the Soviets had lost one of their first ballistic missile subs in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and the Soviets searched for it for months, couldn't find it. It was 16,000 feet deep in the Pacific. Nobody knew exactly where it was. But the Soviets went and looked and looked and looked and determined they couldn't find it and that it was impossible to find. But by this point, we had our SOSUS net of underwater microphones. So we were able to triangulate that position real well. And then we sent, I want to say USS Halibut, I think, with a towed array. And this submarine towed this sled with a cable that went down damn near 16,000 feet and just did a search pattern. And they're not looking at a TV screen. They're getting nothing live. You're just doing a search pattern from a submarine, reel this thing in, develop the film, just nothing but nothing but nothing but nothing but nothing but for weeks, nothing, 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 just silt, nothing, nothing, nothing. Wait a minute. That looks like metal. Let's go back and look at that place. And there sits this Soviet submarine, K-128, I want to say. And it's in essentially perfect condition. Relatively speaking, it didn't just implode. And I get reasons for that in the episode. So, in the early 70s, I want to say it was, we just decided to go out there and scoop a submarine off the bottom of the ocean at 16,000 feet deep. Titanic's at 12,000. We just went out there and picked it up with a big mechanical claw, did it in front of everybody. We got Howard Hughes to be the cover story. And he's going to go scoop magnesium modules off the bottom of the ocean. And I remember that story and thinking, oh, magnesium modules, how cool is that? Just went out there with the Glomar Explorer and reached down 16,000 feet, grabbed a submarine, pulled it up, and damn near got the thing to the surface somewhere around less than... They were more than halfway up to the surface when one of the tines on the forks that picked this thing up broke, for reasons that I get into on the show. And most of the sub fell away, and they recovered the front section of it and so on. So anyway, this was millions of dollars. The Corona project was millions of dollars. SR-71 was millions of dollars. U-2 was millions of dollars. All of these unbelievably advanced, complex miracles, all of it, SIGINT, signal intelligence. And I end the episode by saying this just showed how immeasurably farther ahead the United States was compared to the Soviet Union technologically. In terms of human intelligence, ideologically, a guy named Robert Walker was a communications guy in submarines and in the Navy. And in the course of several years, he gave the Soviets everything that we have. Everything. The propeller designs to stop cavitations so that we had these super quiet subs, he just gave them the designs. He gave them all of the communications codes, gave them how we make our subs run quiet, all of the way we install all the mechanical devices on rubber, pads basically, so that you don't get any vibrations. Walker gave them everything. We spent hundreds of millions of dollars to do these miracles, and in the end, Robert Walker ended up getting paid about $250,000 to give the Soviets everything. And that was one of those great moments in the Cold War series that I like so much, where you get this reversal. That whole episode's about reversals. Actually starts out with USS Triton, first submarine to sail around the world underwater. Was spotted by a Filipino fisherman. And he goes rowing back in. He says he's seen a sea monster out there. And what he saw was a periscope of USS Triton, which went around the world, circumnavigated the world underwater. And it talks about how advanced Nautilus was, and how advanced Skipjack was, and how miserable those Soviet boats were, and how deadly and dangerous. And their first nuclear sub ended up killing something like 40 Russian sailors on its own. The first Soviet nuclear sub, now I'm not sure if that actually is the first Soviet nuclear sub or whether it was the first ballistic sub. The one that they call it, K-19, they called it the Widowmaker in the movie. That's not what the sailors called it. The sailors called it Hiroshima because so many guys died of radiation on that boat. AOC says it has the picture that the Triton took. Yeah, there's a photograph of a guy in a dugout canoe looking like you would look if you just saw some big steel pipe come out of the bottom of the ocean. Anyway, this is it, right? I mean, we accomplish these miracles, and then we give them away because we cannot keep secrets. And there's one thing to have somebody. Walker wasn't a terribly high level guy, but if it turns out that what they're saying about this story is true, that this was a 21-year-old kid who had access to top secret information, and we just let that happen, you don't deserve to, the country like that doesn't deserve to survive. It just doesn't. You just simply can't. It just cannot happen. Hey, Rich, that's great to hear. Rich B in YouTube says he was on USS Tunney SSN 682. I'd love to talk to you about that, man. I do. I really get into submarines in this episode 9. I really get into them hard, and I love them. And that's amazing. One of the things that makes me so pissed off constantly about people talking about nuclear energy is so dangerous. Look at Chernobyl and Fukushima. It's like Chernobyl's what happens when you give technology to communists, and Fukushima's what happens when you try to save a reactor instead of shut it down. But we've had, and I don't know if you know, Rich, somebody might have an idea. I don't know how many people, how many individual sailors, submariners, have served on U.S. nuclear subs, but it's got to be tens of thousands, and it might be hundreds of thousands, of individuals have spent months in a steel tube, completely isolated from the air, and inside that steel tube is a 160 megawatt nuclear reactor. And not a hiccup, not a problem. We've never lost anybody, not once. You're a sonar man, even more interesting to me. We've never had a single, as far as I know, look, we lost 2 boats. We lost Thresher in 61 or 2 or 3, 64. I know we lost Scorpion in 68. Talk about that on that episode too. So we lost 2 subs, but after the I don't know, it was after Thresher, or I think it might have been after Thresher where they put in the SubSafe program. But like commercial aviation, it's just we figured out how to do it. We never lost anybody due to 63. We never lost anybody due to radiation. We've lost vessels, but that's not because of the reactor, well, technically speaking. Marisha says, Bill, why aren't we using the small size reactors that subs use to decentralize power all over the world? This is what the Major Matt Mason animated thing is about. You want to see the reactor room? You want to see the control room? You want to see where all this magic happens? They open a door. There sits a yellow thing about the size of a refrigerator, and I'll look it up, and I'll find out the name of it. Yeah, this is a General Electric A2B from the USS Skipjack class, and it generates X number of megawatts. I'll get this right. And we have 3 of them, and as long as we use them in series, a reactor was more or less stable, lasts forever, just as long as it doesn't go critical. Once it goes critical, then you start taking energy out of it in terms of the neutrons and all the rest of it. So we burned through the first one. We took that out and buried it. And now we're on the second one. We got a third one ready to go. So we're good we got 25 megawatts of power up here for this couple of these little cabins for the next 100 years or so. And the whole thing about this is why I like this idea so much, is I'm going to have this Major Mace Mattingly really amp this up. Do you really want to see where all the power comes? Do you want to see the reactor room? It's going to be a big deal. You want to see the reactor room? Yeah. Okay, I don't know. You have to wear these special goggles and put these things on, right? And it's like you're going to go and see this gigantic room with this rotating thing on 3 gimbals, and electric arcs coming off of it and plasma and all that. He just opens a broom closet. It's just the size of a large closet, the size of a big air conditioner, basically. And says, yeah, it's right here. We got 3 of these things. So this is something that I can do with this kind of content that me just talking about is not going to get through. And we had this in the early 19 we had it in the late 50s. Nautilus Nautilus was amazing. Nautilus Prior to Nautilus, diesel electric World War II diesel electric boat, either a German U-boat or a U.S. fleet boat, which I think the U.S. fleet boats are best subs of the war by far, because they had to carry a ton of diesel fuel because they had to sail across the frickin' Pacific Ocean before they could run into any kind of. I mean, they had to cross the Pacific Ocean on the surface. But generally speaking, a diesel electric boat of that era, they're a little better now, could do 9 knots underwater for maybe 48 hours. That's not a lot of distance. Nautilus submerged in the Bering Sea off the coast of Alaska, and I want to say 3 or 4 days later, it surfaced in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Greenland. It went right over the top of the world, sailed underneath the Arctic ice. Operation, was it Sunshine, I want to say? Game changer. And what's especially interesting about that to me, and again, it's in this episode, is that I don't know whether it was done intentionally or not, but it seemed like we did this the right way. I was seeing, I was listening to it. There's another guy on YouTube. I just subscribed to him. He's a former F-14 backseater, former F-14 Rio. And he was talking in detail about the USS Ford. And he said that the Ford's had a lot of problems. And the main reason that the Ford has had a lot of problems is that they did so many things new. Is it Ward Carroll? Yeah, Ward Carroll. He's fantastic. I really like him. So Ward is saying the reason that the Ford is so over schedule and over cost is because they're integrating, I think, something like 23 new systems, 5 of which are absolutely critical. And they're all going into the ship at the same time. And the general consensus looking back is we should have put one of those, or maybe 2, into the next generation, and then iterated it over the next 3 or 4 ships. But that's what happened. The smart way is what happened with Rickover and the birth of the nuclear submarines. Nautilus was an extraordinarily conventional-looking submarine. After World War II was over, they took a number of the newer fleet boats and they started a program called Guppy, which I remember from being 12 or something, Greater Underwater Propulsion Power. They basically took a World War II sub, which if you look at it, has got a deck gun and it's got, all of these periscopes are just out there in the open, radar dish, and then there's another deck gun aft, and the one's conning tower is just a bunch of protrusions. It's just draggy as hell, right? So they just basically took this frame and put a very much more streamlined hull around it. They basically just built a new top around the highest drag parts. And then they had the same sub, and it just performed so much better underwater. So instead of trying to get everything in the Nautilus the right way, what they did was they took the propulsion issue, the nuclear reactor issue, and put it in a very conventional looking sub, which was the Nautilus. And at the same time, they took this revolutionary idea about a submarine that is more efficient underwater than it is on the surface because it's going to live underwater. A nuclear sub's going to live underwater. It took a while for that to sink in. And so that teardrop shape was being developed at the same time, but they didn't try to do the reactor and the radical new hull design in the same vehicle. Nautilus was the testbed for the reactor for nuclear-powered submarine, and USS Albacore was the first modern-looking sub. It was a teardrop shape with the sail and everything. Looked more or less like a modern sub, but it was conventionally powered. So once you had the nuclear reactor working, and once you had the basic hydrodynamic design working, then you put them together, and then you get what I always thought was the coolest sub in the history of the world, which was a skipjack class. A skipjack class sub just looks, the sail is so big relative to the hull, the thing just looks like a frickin' drag racer. And it was a fast sub too. And skipjack was one of the first nuclear submarines in service. I want to say they retired that thing in like 1969 or later. I mean, they served for like 30 years. Yes, Albacore is on display. It's out in public. Um, so anyway, all of this incredible technology at an incredible cost. Forget about the money because money doesn't mean anything anymore, but nevertheless, all of our tax dollars going to these technological miracles like the SR-71 and Skipjack and all the rest of it. And then our adversaries get all of that for free, and we can include the Manhattan Project and all that money and time as well to develop a nuclear weapon. They got that for free too because we can't maintain operational security on our most sensitive information. And I don't know. I have a theory comes to mind, and that theory is that no one's been executed for treason in this country since, was it Eddie Slovik? I want to say maybe World War II. Walker died in prison, and he went to prison, but he wasn't hanged, and he should have been. Matt Harris has got it right on the nose. Spies are cheap. Yeah. So we spent hundreds of millions of dollars to get this technology, and the Soviets paid 250,000 over 10 years, by the way, not just a lump sum. Over 10 years or whatever, they paid 250 $250,000 to Walker, and they got everything. The Rosenbergs and all of the rest of Alger Hiss, all these guys, they just gave it to him, and we couldn't stop them. I suppose if you're going to look on the bright side of this, not that there's ever a bright side for this intelligent kind of leak, but I suppose that you could probably explain most of this by saying that in an open society, it's much harder to keep these kind of secrets. And it's only because we have an open society that we're able to do this technology in the first place. That's the best spin I can put on it. But yeah, these communist spies in the 50s, right after World War II, late 40s and 50s, were not only left wingers and communists and personally believe in it, but they also believed that the world would be safer if two sides had this weapon. And so what they did was they allowed the Soviet Union to enslave people for another 40 years. If they had simply had the ability to read a history book and look at the history of the United States after World War II, we had the 33 aircraft carriers, and we had a fleet of B-29s. We had as many atom bombs as we could build, and we could deliver them anywhere. And what did we do? We took these planes and ships back and just cut them to pieces, turned them into razor blades and Coke cans. And these idiots, these brilliant nuclear scientist idiots, are saying, no, it's much better if we give these horrible people who are massacring 20 million of their own people, let's give them nuclear weapons too. That way we'll have a nice, fair, balanced world. We don't have to worry about American aggression. It's like, are you out of your mind? Out of your mind? The Soviets invaded Hungary in 56, Czechoslovakia in 1968, North Korea invaded South Korea in 1950, North Vietnam invaded South Vietnam in the early 60s. All over the world is just Soviet aggression, and that's because of these egghead intellectuals who had it all figured out. And as Sad Wings Raging said, McCarthy was right. He was right. That the real tragedy of McCarthy was he was the wrong guy with the right message. And thank you for that, Huscarl. Phyllis Knudsen. We had 33 fleet carriers. Those would be the fast Essex-class aircraft carriers, probably the finest, most advanced ship of the entire war. We had 33 of those. Some of them were older, like Enterprise, for example, but we had 33 fleet carriers, and we had 104 flat tops. Most of those would be jeep carriers, escort carriers, like Gambier Bay. And the rest of those guys out at Taffy 3. I'm not going to start that again, but anyway, there you go. Okay, so I said I needed to do a short show tonight. It's 8 o'clock. I was going to use that as a kind of a satirical launch into getting maybe one question out of the way, but I have an awful lot to do, and I actually feel like it's probably more insulting to do one question than not at all. So I got to get this Gorn animated, and I got to get it out of here tonight. Dang it, Bill, says Eric Blake in all caps, yelling at me from God knows where. hidden location somewhere in the internet. Eric, that's why your computer has a Control C and Control V function. It's extremely useful. Um, oh, well, that's nice to hear. Uh, User you know who says, just to change gears for a second, has anyone else noticed that everyone seems to be making points about men and women's sports that Bill was already making years ago? Bill was early to the argument. That's the only reason that anybody would come and watch this stuff, is to try and get a look. Everybody wants to know the future. That's why there's punditry. That's why I'm here in this studio. Uh, People want to know what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen, but if you process enough information and you have enough history, you can make probably more educated guesses than maybe some other people. Um, and Grant wants to know, will there be an expansion or continuation of the What We Saw series? We said Apollo 11, What We Saw. We did the Cold War, What We Saw. Then we did America's Forgotten Heroes. And this last one could have been, they could have told me they wanted some version of What We Saw, but no. The one I just finished, the one that took me out of coming home to America for 5 months, 6 months, or longer, was not a What We Saw series. It was I simply called it an Empire of Terror. Although I did like Eric Blake's name very much, which was his suggestion was to call it Blood Red. I thought that was fantastic. Um, so anyway, take your question, Eric, and copy and paste it, and what you do with it between then and there is entirely your business. So I'm going to get on this thing because it's already 2 days late, and you know we just need to get this product out the door. So that's what we're going to do. I'm looking forward to reading the comments about what you think about my guest star in the Center Square. Um, Now I got to listen to a bunch of the episodes so I can get what was as close to that voice as possible. Um, okay, Marusha, I'll see if I can take a look at that tomorrow. If we shoot virtue signals tomorrow. Um, So anyway, yeah, I guess that'll do it. So I'm gonna wrap this up here at a mere 1 hour and 47 minutes, and hopefully the this thing will work as well as I, at least to some degree, as well as I hope it will, because I had a lot of fun doing it anyway. At least there's that. So this show is made possible by the members of BillWhittle.com who continue to pay their $9.95 a month or more in some cases, and whose patience is eternal and support is unlimited, and to whom I'm extraordinarily grateful every single day. Every single day. And we'd love to have more of you. So if you've been watching the show for a while and you like the show, if you want to head over to BillWhittle.com, you can become a member, make a one-time donation. That's why the Stratosphere Lounge is not broken up every 6 or 7 minutes with 3 minutes of commercials. Um, Is it Rad Robot said, I just got here. I'm sorry, man. We're just closing it up. However, I'm going to immediately post this, so it'll be on the BillWhittle.com YouTube page. I'll get that going, and I will then get on the Gorn Captain as a political commentator. And it wasn't lost on me that this is similar to what Doomcock does and a few other people, where you're writing a character that you're going to voice yourself and is essentially, just kind of fun. So we'll see. All right. So that'll do it. Thanks again for being here. As always, thanks for all the support and the kind words and the membership and all the rest of it. Yes, I can. G.K. Masterson, who's one of the invaluable members of our little Strata community here, has asked just before I pushed the Frank button, to say if people could send good thoughts her way for a big interview she's got tomorrow. So either think good vibes or send prayers her way. One of the finest people we've ever known, and been nothing but generous and not only along with Marusha and small number of other people, not only bending over backwards to do things for me for free, but also tolerating the fact that I most of the time am off looking into some frickin' pit of humanity and don't even get back to them on time. So, best of luck to you, GK. And I have no doubt you're going to knock it out of the park because you are an extraordinarily capable individual, and I have no doubt whatsoever that you'll be the best person on the job. So, good luck, and everybody watching this, wish her good luck, and let's let all that good karma head that way, and be bold, and mighty forces will rush to your aid. And on that note, we will see you next time right here on the Stratosphere Lounge.